Thanks everyone for coming. Really good to see you all as a part of, I believe this is sort of week 6 or 7 now. And really great to see, a lot of progress you're making in your individual startups. This is one of those events that I'm really personally very excited about, just because, we get to bring you some amazing founders who either have a migrant experience or just generally are doing some amazing work from overseas. And just for you to learn about what's happening in other markets and how, I guess you can sort of mimic some of those lessons and not make the mistakes that other people have made. So really, this is about, learning about other founders' journeys. And we've got some amazing people here today as well. And I've got a personal interest in this too, so I'll sort of mention that really quickly. So we've got 2 amazing mentors of mine. I'll call them mentors, Emeline and Eric Dahlstrom. I met them actually at Singularity University, which is an amazing sort of incubator, accelerator based in Silicon Valley back in 2017. And they're, I will say, space tech entrepreneurs, or you can even call them astropreneurs. And they've been doing some phenomenal work in the US and internationally generally, both in consulting as well as in sort of technology, particularly space tech. But then they moved to New Zealand as a part of a fellowship program called Edmund Hillary Fellowship, which again, I'm very privileged to be a part of as well. And they've been in New Zealand for the last 3 years, building the space ecosystem there and just doing some phenomenal work. I've recently also joined their team part-time to also help them as sort of head of growth and partnerships. So it's really exciting, all these sort of different worlds coming together. And I wanted to bring them here to share their story of migration, of entrepreneurship, as well as just share some lessons that they've learned along the way. So welcome, Eric and Emeline. Really good to have you both here today. I would love to sort of hear from you, share your story with the cohort. And then after you've done that, I'll ask you a bunch of questions around, like your story, and we'll tease out a few different things. And then we'll also open up to the cohort if they have any questions. So as you're listening to Eric and Emeline's story, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. And we'll sort of come back to them, when we do the Q&A. So over to you two.
Great, thanks so much, Usman, for basically bringing us here. And kia ora, everybody from New Zealand. We're in Christchurch.
Yeah, it's really great to electronically meet all of you. I hear you're from all sorts of different countries, and sounds like an incredible program.
Yeah, so maybe we'll start just talking individually about our journeys as well. So I'm originally from the Philippines. I still maintain my Filipino citizenship and then I migrated to the US after kind of like going all around the globe, and so I have both citizenships. I consider myself as a global nomad, global citizen. This is probably my my 5th country that I've actually sought some kind of like a residency, and has just been going kind of like all over the place for years. I'm probably old enough to be your mom, so I've been like over 30 years. I've been going all over the place. But I started out like in the Philippines with very kind of like high aspirations, and I've always been passionate and in love with space. Just the fact that that I think that our future is actually going to be that space has a big role in kind of the future of humanity. Regardless of what we do, kind of like in terms of our sustainability and the planet. It's definitely well sort of like tied to the future. And so I've always been like that ever since I was a kid. But the thing is, growing up in the Philippines during that time, I was actually I was there basically all throughout my life in the Philippines. It was during Marcos's dictatorship. So there was, for me, somebody who's like interested in space and wanted to be involved, there's like really absolutely 0% that I could potentially ever be part of it. But somehow like about 25 years ago, I got a scholarship to go to this program called the International Space University, and that sort of like basically just changed my entire life. The connections that I have made through that sort of reverberates throughout my entire career. And so for me, I felt that somebody said like I won the lotto, because that basically gave me a lot of opportunities that I would never have had kind of if I was still back in the Philippines. And so kind of like throughout my life, I want to make sure that opportunity is also given to basically anybody. I don't feel privileged. I want to make sure that everybody else also has that opportunity. So which is why my passion for space really didn't I've always loved space, did physics and space science, worked for a bunch of space startup companies as well. So I've always thought of myself as an entrepreneur, not as a founder originally, but like somebody who's always there during the beginning of a startup. Not until like this past 3 years when we kind of like, I actually did start a startup with Spacebase. But basically because I felt so passionate about it, it didn't dawn on me exactly what I thought was my kind of like what we call our massive transformational purpose, or our MTP, where for me, the real passion is that this democratization of making sure that every single person has that opportunity to have the same opportunity as I have in the space kind of like industry. And so when we created Spacebase 3 years ago, really when we say the democratization of access to space for everyone, it was truly trying to create the opportunities and the ecosystems all around the world so that there would be the same opportunities, same kind of like jobs and same industry that would be available for any country in the world. And so that's sort of like the how Spacebase came about. And we think of ourselves as prototyping in New Zealand. We thought that New Zealand was a really good place that ticks all of the boxes for having a sustainable space industry and space ecosystem. And so over the past 3 years, we've been working on this through different avenues, and we want to make sure that what we're doing here actually works before we kind of like share it to the rest of the world. Maybe Eric, you can talk about what's happening, what we've done with yourself.
All right. Yeah, let me also give a little background. I was born in the U.S. And I studied physics, astronomy, and space engineering. And for a long time, I was basically following the big space projects of NASA, going to be involved with I worked on the design of the International Space Station, and I worked on the shuttle safety. And at that time, I was moving around the country, going to wherever the big space project was. And I also worked with lots of big companies, with Raytheon and Lockheed and other ones. But then recently, in the last 10 years, I've been working in California with space startups, and a big part of this comes from the theme of Singularity University with the exponential technologies, where computing and big data analysis and things like that can have opened up possibilities for applications and projects all around the world. And that and so now it's some of our friends in their garage starting a space company which becomes the biggest remote sensing company in the world and things like that. And so I worked with lots of different space startups in California, and then but I share with Emeline the passion for trying to get the whole world involved in seeing the opportunities to be involved in space projects. And so it really is a transformation in ways of thinking that now people in different countries can be involved in the cutting edge, space projects, and in fact the projects I'm involved with are still distributed space companies. There were people working all around the world, all connected virtually, and so so we want to bring these opportunities to people around the world and get them all involved, so that it really have an opportunity for humanity to go out into and develop the solar system and in a different way than from the old style.
And maybe one thing to add as well is that if you look at the global space economy today, 70 to 75% of the kind of like the overall activities are actually really just done by the 9 wealthiest countries in the world. So this is sort of like really the main problem here, where we want to make sure that that's really not the case. Like you have to change that demographics of making sure that the rest of the world and other countries actually are involved.
So, but yeah, through my working career, I've seen, big organizations, small ones, internal entrepreneurial teams within organizations. I worked on the NASA Tiger teams where NASA would pick a few people to work intensively in a small group. And then I've seen all sorts of startups either succeed or fail depending on the personalities involved.
And the kind of like but the major thing here to also say in terms of the space industry, which is what Eric was alluding to, is no longer the realm of like big governments and big aerospace companies, where today, because of the technology being democratized as well and off the shelf, the barriers to entry has now gotten smaller, and which is why as mentioned, there are now companies today that used to be just like either working in their garages, or they used to be like professors in university, and we've seen them kind of like grow from how they kind of like started out just being scrappy, but then now 10 years after, they're dominating kind of like their particular segment in the space industry today. And it's great to see kind of like that journey that happens even in kind of like a very risky industry like space.
So some of our former students now have 50 satellites and things like that. So you can see the entire journey that they've gone through.
So thank you both for sharing your story and obviously of migration, Emeline, and also like what you've been doing in the space industry. It's really exciting to hear about how you're democratizing that access to space. I guess for a lot of the people here who are working in different industries, one of the things that they would want to know is, this is such a big project, right? And this is, I would sort of say it's a lifelong calling. So given that you're already, 3 years into the work that you've been doing, what are some of the greatest lessons that you've learned along the way that you can share with some of the people who are just starting out?
Yeah, and just a disclaimer, we're also still like we're also still learning, and we're still growing, and we have our ups and downs and all kind of like everything that you probably are going through right now. But for one, I think one of the things, maybe one of the biggest things for me is that is kind of like not to be afraid to pivot at the right time and when it's actually when it's necessary. I feel that at least even with the small time frame that we've had, there are things that are beyond your control, which is like COVID, for example, which happened like for us. Most of the things that we've been doing kind of like pre-COVID a lot of them were like person-to-person interaction and programs. But because of what happened, we actually pivoted to now look more into online like programs and services, which we were already kind of like heading in that direction, but it actually accelerated sort of that pivot because of the circumstances. But prior to that, I think I feel that we spent a lot of time kind of working on something that somehow deep inside me, I felt it was really not the direction where we were supposed to go. But there's a lot of factors that that you always have to think about, and sometimes it is kind of like beyond your control. But when you actually I don't know, I think when the gut feeling is there that it's really not, and even though it might take a lot of resources, or it might kind of like probably even burn bridges, I think it's better to kind of really do the right thing than to sort of expend resources and energy and time to then somehow kind of like down the line you kind of like end up in the same place anyway.
Yeah, and the example we're talking about is we put a lot of effort into a software platform, and we fell into the trap of thinking, oh, it's a sunk cost, that we've already invested all this time, we should just keep on fixing it, and it was really just absorbing all our efforts and not giving any good results. So it's we recognize that early on, but we just wasted too much effort on it. So that was a lesson. But some of the other things that we're trying such a wide spectrum of activities in New Zealand to try to create this community and help entrepreneurs in develop space projects, that we have also discovered that there's some things that you meet that a great deal of resistance in a small community in New Zealand. You cannot expect to change dramatically the status quo, or established relationships, whereas they're very receptive to something new coming in. So if we offer a new activity, we get a lot of support and a lot of partnerships, but don't try to disturb the existing funding relationships, because people's lives depend on those assumptions.
So I guess another way of like probably saying that as well as like to be very culturally sensitive to the kind of like the base or the community that you're trying to serve. And so we come from Silicon Valley. There's a very different mentality, different way of working. And if you come into and this I'm sure is very relevant to, especially with migration, where you're going to a different country and it's a very different way of working. And so those things are very, very important to make sure, else you'll head into a wall where
you have to ask people about like in California, people, if you give them a document with a proposal, maybe you have a shot at getting a quick acceptance. But here in New Zealand, nothing happens unless you've had 3 cups of coffee at different meetings. And so it's it's all based on, they want to trust you as a person before they'll even consider working with you. So.
Yeah, so it's very much relationship based, where in other areas or in other places that might not be the case. I feel like for example in Silicon Valley, it's more about who's got the most innovative idea, or the best way of actually like putting that idea into practice, and so that's sort of like the in that you get, at least in that kind of an environment.
I think that's some great lessons, and thank you for sharing them on pivoting, sort of understanding sunk costs, and then sort of moving on from them. I know this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs go through, that journey, and then particularly talking about relationships. I think that's something that's very similar here in Australia as well. That it is a country built on relationships. So definitely for any entrepreneur who's trying to do the same thing here, it is like relationships will mean a lot. Even if you have a superior product, doesn't mean it will necessarily win. definitely not in the short term if you don't know the right people, which is an unfortunate thing, particularly if you come from a migrant background and you don't know the right people. And so, like, do think about that, and do think about ways in which you can increase your relationships, especially right now in a world that's all online. I think that's going to become even more important. I'm curious to hear, I know, Eric, you mentioned that you worked with many founders in the past, particularly, in the Valley, but also now in New Zealand. So in your experience, what are some of the, I guess, traits that you've seen in successful founders with your work?
I've really, I've gotten to appreciate more the founders that can motivate a team and bring along and inspire a team to share in the journey of the entrepreneurial project. I've seen sort of horror stories of, I shared an office with one of the founders on one of our projects, and I would watch team members on the team come in, and he would tell them different stories depending on the team member, and we'd like create artificial conflict within the team. And I just couldn't imagine why he did that. And he sort of like wanted to control everything with little, like little puppets, and it was a terrible way of doing that. And 10 years later, he's still trying to get his project launched, and so it's not surprising to me that that is how it's ended up. But there are other people that really inspire the team and get the best effort, and the founder actually knows some, or bothers to find out something about the motivation about the different team members, and help them achieve their own goals.
Yeah, that actually resonates a lot with me as well, especially with with founders that I've kind of like either worked for, ones that really inspire kind of like everybody, are the ones that really have very kind of like long lasting and also I think successful kind of like leadership, and I just like, it's the analogy of like, if you really believe in the founder or the leader, you can go in a burning bus with them, right? And so I've had really great just great experiences with people that are inspirational, because also for one, I think the ones that are very inspirational are the ones who roll up their sleeves and actually do the same thing as you do, and don't really think that they're kind of like a cut above. Those are really I think for me, I respect quite a lot, and try to emulate as well as somebody that hopefully I can kind of like do the same in terms of like what we're doing.
Yeah, and there's one friend that is an entrepreneur that it's kind of crazy, because over the years I've worked for him, he's worked for me, back and forth 5 different times, and so definitely you don't want to piss people off or burn bridges, because things might turn around the next time you're working together. So
I think that's some really, really important points, and one of the sort of threads that I picked up there was around coaching and founders developing their team members, and particularly helping them meet their own goals. So I think that's such an important point. In particular, I love this book that I want to share with everyone here. It's called The $1 Trillion Coach, which is by Bill Campbell, or about Bill Campbell actually, who was a coach of Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, and Steve Jobs at the same time. So there's a reason why it's called The $1 Trillion Coach, and it has some really interesting insights around how do you think about your leadership as coaching and helping people meet their goals. So that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I'm also mindful of your time, and I don't want to take too much. I know you probably have to run in about 15-20 minutes. So curious to hear if any of the sort of core members have any questions. I see your hand, Gloria. Do you want to go?
Thanks. Thank you. I just don't know how to do the raising hand. Thank you so much for sharing the experiences. And I had a question about, that decision that you've made on pivoting, and also I guess it relates to your comment about being sensitive to your communities, and that's because we kind of as with COVID, we went online in our services, and we kind of stumbled upon a community that we were not even thinking that could be our customer segment, and it's a US community of homeschoolers that are really interested in the educational offerings that we have. And yet, our original effort was kind of Australia, Latin America, and we haven't got that much traction here. And the people that we've spoken locally are more interested in the in-person experience. So I just wanted to get your thoughts about, what are the things that you look for in terms of serving well your community, and how do you kind of make those decisions?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, the entire world is experiencing virtual things, the last few months in transforming, people that never did a Zoom call before are now getting to be experts. But I don't know, it's still, the building of communities of trust or it seems like it still seems to be a challenge about, where do people get their recommendations that they believe in and things like that. It's pretty tricky to break into an international market with virtual coming in virtually without a local connection. What do you think about?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. However, I think also it would be interesting to kind of like, well, for one, get some connections in the communities that you're like trying to build. So again, like what Eric was saying, I actually think that the world has gotten smaller because of COVID, and that now you can actually cross barriers or cross oceans to be able to serve people, which sort of like happened to us this past few months. It used to be we were just like focused on New Zealand, but then actually COVID opened the doors to the different other different continents because of the fact that everybody's kind of like online. So for sure that's an opportunity to certainly look at, but at the same time also I think one way is to again find either specific people that are maybe even like doing the same things that you're doing in the kind of like the areas and the markets that you're looking at, and then just like trying to see how they've done or even connect with them kind of thing. To see how that's working, to just get a feel of what the opportunities are.
Also, I mean, we've done a number of programs where we do something for an audience, okay, but but Zoom is not very good at all for sort of discussions that would happen in the hallways in a meeting, and so. I think we need to make more of an effort, and maybe you might try it, of sort of follow up quick conversations one-on-one to get more feedback, and maybe some because some people, once you if you get them committed to at least do a sample program and give you some feedback, then they start to open up their connections and suggestions about where to go next and broaden your base. That might be something to try.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, other Gloria, you can have a go.
Hi everyone, and thanks Emeline and Eric for sharing your time and passion and energy. Definitely contagious, even I don't know much about space. Firstly, democratizing the space is very ambitious. but sounds like a really good cause. So my first question is, what does good look like to you guys? And then the second point is, which is more a personal kind of question. You talk about New Zealand is very relationship based, and what makes you actually uproot from a very established, well-built network in the US and actually move to New Zealand?
Well, maybe I'll answer the latter one first. So I mean, just personally, we've been visiting New Zealand kind of like in the past. We're both we're both outdoors people. We love the kind of like the scenery.
Actually, it was Lord of the Rings.
Yes, it's Lord of the Rings.
That's what I suspected, but keep asking.
So I mean, there's kind of like there's that aspect to it, but also I think it was the right time at the right place, because 3 years ago it was when the New Zealand Space Agency started. It was Rocket Lab was about to kind of like launch, and the Edmund Hillary Fellowship. Also we're kind of like the first group that applied, and so it just was the right timing. And we've always wanted to be in New Zealand, but we wanted to make sure that we were working on what we're passionate about. And it just so happened that space kind of has bubbled up. So we were very, very lucky that kind of like happened.
About the future we went. Star Trek universe.
So that's also the easiest way to say it. Like when you think about like the science fiction Star Trek universe, is that humanity has basically been is working as a whole, as a planet, as opposed to like borders between countries and so forth. And so it's a very utopian future that we want to see, and so and as you said, it's such a huge kind of like, how do you even think about like having that as tackling that kind of a problem? But I feel that that's really like, we want that future. I mean, everybody wants that future.
And a lot of it is like we want the young Emelines of the world to realize they can be involved wherever they are.
And so for me, even if like I like it's not in my lifetime that's going to happen, I want to be part of the movement that will make that happen. So that's sort of like, for me, at least, I kind of like helping pave the road to make that happen is something that I think is fulfilling.
And to sort of pick up on that, I think it's one of those things where it's better to fail at something really large than to be successful at some mediocre goal. So, like what you guys are trying to do, I think is probably a 100-year project. But, absolutely someone has to do it. So, it's great that you've already gotten started. Ariana, do you want to go?
Yeah, that's actually to lead on from that question, because, and it was the same thing when Gloria said democratizing space. It's like, when you hear that, it's like, wow, that's incredible. And like, something that you don't even ever, the words that don't go well together, like you're just like, how does that even work? How does that happen? And yeah, I'm big on that as well, and like have this, big vision that's like kind of impossible or far away that I really want to work towards. And like, that so like inspires me, and that I try and inspire people towards. But then, and you always kind of get that whole, but like, that's not how the system works, like you're going to be crushed by the system, and it's all about this system. And it's like trying to constantly battle against changing how, like, the system can change, and the system has changed, and how do you, like, I don't know. So yeah, I guess my question's more like, because you have this like incredible concept of like completely, changing a system, like how do you portray that to the world, and how do you talk about it, and how do you convince people that it can be changed? Or obviously, like kind of like your tips of what you've done and what you've seen has worked, what maybe hasn't, what has been received well.
No, that's a great question. Is a complex one to answer as well, but it's definitely, at least on the Spacebase side, it's like it's top down, bottoms up. so both sides like is what we're like trying to tackle. One with the top-down version is you want to create a systems change. Essentially, and that system change, it means that you also need to educate for a mind shift for people, like, so in government, in local government, like in the public's eye, that this is something that that actually has to happen. So which is why a big part of what we do is like on the education bit. And so there's that side of the thing, and then on the other side is on the grassroots side is like, yeah, you're trying to inspire people that have the same goals as you do, and so we're trying to create a community of the same people who want this, like kind of like want that long-term goal. And you chip away on it like one person at a time and one organization at a time. And so we've done a few things on that end. With kind of like, you know, you can create meetups in different cities. Like here in New Zealand, it's kind of like what we did. We created this, we run the national space challenges because it's also a way to basically spark the interest of like different people to create innovation, ideas, projects, and startups. We're very big on leveraging incentive prices because I think it's a great methodology of hitting many birds with one stone in terms of trying to kind of like move something that is sort of like big and a problem that is big. So yeah, I think one thing is definitely you try to take everybody on the journey with you, is I think is another way to do that. And by basically, inspiration is one part of it, but also trying to let people know that it's not just inspiration and it's also not just exploration. So most people think of space that, you know, it's science and exploration, but actually today that's not it anymore. There's an economic development and economic benefit that is at the end of this tunnel too. Like, I mean, it's a more than almost $2 trillion industry that we're kind of like trying to build in the next 20 years. And so it has social impact and it has economic impact, which I think is a great, you know, it's a great story.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sort of mindful of time. I know that we've got about 7 minutes left before we have to let you go. But what I do want to ask before we, you know, like let you go and do your activities, which we'll also ask you a little bit, but is what's the best piece of advice that you've gotten on your startup journey that you would like to pass on to all the amazing migrantpreneurs we have in the room?
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe I just have like two ones quickly. Is one, definitely you need to be working on what you're passionate about, or else it's not gonna last. And it just I've seen it so many times with so many people. And your lasting power, basically during those times that you're at the lowest point, you'd have to draw on your passion, because or else you're gonna give up much easily. And then the other thing is like a practical one, which I've actually always used, is that I actually think that in anything, don't hesitate to ask. Mm-hmm. I think it's just that just ask. Basically, if there's anything at all, it applies to anything. Because if you don't ask, you'll never know if you actually get that no or that yes. And sometimes we're hindered by us just kind of like rationalizing about, you know, not doing it or not asking. So I think that's my
yeah. And I think there's the people around you really want you to succeed, and even as you know, interact with people, it's like that's you know, every time I've been really nervous about, you know, some pitch or something like that, it turns out that, you know, the people there really want you to there are very few people out there that are acting as gatekeepers. I mean, there's a lot more people that are really supportive once you ask them and tell them how they can help you. yeah, and sort of, and that long range vision and passion is the guidance there. You may change your direction several times along the way, and you have to respond to or pick up the signals on that. But it's you know, it's and sort of, you know, it helps to have, you know, it was useful for us to be in Silicon Valley for so long, because you would people would sort of remind you that you know, oh, I've tried 6 times and failed, and this is my 7th time, and there was no concern about you know, they just everybody understood that it was, you just,
that failure is really just learning.
Yeah, it's just part part of the process. And so it's yeah, just that's what I've seen in other countries. People are just sort of paralyzed by the fear of failure, and that's you shouldn't let that happen. You should just keep on, or I guess what is the hockey or soccer team term, shots on the goal. And so you just keep on taking shots, and something will work.
Thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your story, the amazing knowledge and wisdom, and what you've, I guess, learned so far through this journey. So really grateful for you showing up and sharing this. We know that this is the World Space Week this week. So I'm curious to hear from you as well, like what are some of the activities you're doing and you're going to now before we let you go?
Yeah, so yeah, it's World Space Week this week. There's over 1,000 like events happening like all over the world today, and so like a week ago, nothing was happening here in Christchurch. So I basically said that's not right, and so we did manage to rally like about 10 organizations to exhibit at the main library here, and then we did some workshops as well for kids this afternoon. And the reason why we're kind of like going now is that we're hosting another presentation on electric new propulsion for satellites in Wellington, which is a sister city like here.
And it's sort of a measure of the community that's building here, is that for Emeline just, you know, a few days ago to say, hey, let's make an exhibit, and the library says sure, and the 10 people say sure, and all this stuff. And so normally every once in a while they grumble and say, you know, we could have used some more notice, but but it was good reactions.
Awesome. Well, that's really great to hear, and I really wish you all the best for your mission, which is to democratize access to space. Thank you for coming. Thank you for, you know, sharing your knowledge, and thank you for, you know, sharing and speaking on so many topics, you know, that are sort of near and dear to our founder's heart and are so important. Really appreciate your time, and all the best with your session.
Thanks so much, and again, thanks again, and please reach out to us. Again, it's info@spacebase.co. It's probably the easiest. So yeah, good luck with all of your endeavors as well in your startups.